Welcome to my newly rebranded channel. It is now called Visionary Ventures. It had been called Introspection with Jeff because that I saw was the purpose of this channel. I wanted to explore my own experiences, try to understand myself, and in doing so, perhaps you could understand yourself better. I wanted to explore concepts. I love science, I love physics, and I love theoretical concepts about how things were created, how things exist, how our minds work, psychology, stuff like that. So now it's called Visionary Ventures because, first of all, I wanted to drop off my name Jeff in the title, and I created a few other playlists in this channel, one of which is to share my creative interests, my creative projects that I see as part of myself. And I only have this channel, so I wanted to fuel everything into it. It's an examination of myself. So creativity is, I think, one of the best expressions of oneself. That having been said, as you can see, the background here is still a white wall. I live in an apartment. However, I was looking around, I have this green screen, and unfortunately it didn't come with something to hook it up. I thought maybe I could tape it to the wall somehow or find some way of propping it up, but I ordered it, it should be coming perhaps Monday. It's scheduled for Monday on Amazon. So from this point on, hopefully you'll be able to see stuff projected against the green screen. In other words, I'll put up whatever relates to the episode of the day or episode of the week. I could put up stars, I could put up a different background. You get the idea. So for this video, I am proud to finally present a unique idea. Maybe you've heard about, in the days before the internet, you've heard about dating sites, dating companies. They would have the client sit in front of a camera like I am now and answer a series of questions, and it would be put on videotape. Somebody would go through and, actually the company's staff would try to match people based on their interview. This is essentially an interview. So I thought, what would be a greater idea than to be asked a series of questions. I've come up with these questions. They're in chopped up, they're basically serving as chapters. That's the way I'm going to do it in my video. And you can simply skip to whatever question you want. And there will be a timeline in the description in this video and in the description below in YouTube. And I can do two videos. The first video, this video, will be me talking about myself. And in the second video, I will do questions about the woman that I'm looking for, my ideal woman, my ideal partner. So let's get started, shall we? My height is 5'7". My weight is currently around 200 pounds. I know my BMI is about 31, and I'm trying to shrink down to 25 in terms of BMI. That means losing about 40 pounds would be great. That would mean I would be 160 pounds. That would be healthy. That I'm smart, that I'm creative. I know when people have told me this in the past, I didn't show a lot of appreciation, but believe me, I really do take it to heart, and I really appreciate when somebody does compliment me in that way. I wonder about my looks. When somebody says I'm attractive, I haven't heard that a lot, but that does mean a lot to me too. My creativity perhaps is the most important compliment somebody can give me, because it's what I'm most passionate about. It's what I most care about being known for. Okay, this is going to make me sound really boring. I want to project my own true self, and whenever I answer this question on quizzes, I think that people will suspect that I'm not so interesting in person, that I am not interesting to talk with. But I'll tell you what I basically enjoy doing on a Saturday night. I'm basically at home. I'm watching TV and I'm watching videos. This is Saturday, so this is what I'll probably be doing tonight. I'll be watching television shows from my youth, maybe movies from my youth like MST3K and 1980s sitcoms and so forth, Knight Rider, Dick Van Dyke Show, shows that I really enjoyed growing up with. What I like, and also being creative. Saturday evening, I'm a night person. I tend to be a night person, and I think many creative people are. So my creativity tends to come out, and I'll be watching something and writing a story, or figuring something out, designing something. What I like to do more often, I don't know if it's my opportunity that I don't take advantage of, or whether I haven't had the opportunity, but I would like to go out more, and I would like to be more sightseeing. I would like to be with people more. If I don't really have anybody to go with, I don't tend to go out, unless of course it's for an errand, but that's deviating off the question. I like to be excited, I like to be very involved, and I like to be intellectually involved as well. Well, certainly my diet and trying to lose the 30 or 40 pounds comes to mind as the most recent. I can't think of a time other than the trip to Israel I went on when I was in the summer in high school, between I think sophomore and junior year, when we went to Israel and it was hot and we were mountain climbing and we were hiking. I think of myself as capable of exercise and moving around. I remember way back in high school, maybe this says something about why I need to lose 30 or 40 pounds. In high school, we had gym class, of course, and we would have a section of the year devoted to weights and basically weightlifting, or exercising in the gym, which I really liked because it wasn't a competitive sport. I hated the drudgery of being in gym class, and we were playing especially basketball, or that I didn't really know the rules for, and I couldn't keep up with the other people, going back and forth, and baseball. I wasn't really good with the bat and ball, hitting the ball. I don't tend to be a very athletic person. However, I think I have remarkable strength. I have good health, and I have good musculature. I'd say it depends on what you mean by physical. Right now, I changed my diet, and I'm drinking more water. I know that, okay, all right, I had a stroke. Maybe this is something you don't specifically do in a real dating video, but I'll mention it here because it's for the sake of people getting to know me better. I had a stroke New Year's Eve going into 2018. So that was very physically challenging, especially the inpatient therapy I had in the hospital, my left arm and left leg were very weak. The muscles weren't receiving commands. They were limp at the very beginning, and I had to strengthen my leg. I'm still trying to perfect my walking. I think it's very good, my walking. I think you can hardly notice, but I'm still trying to twist my leg and walk in the proper motion so that the muscles within the leg coordinate properly and so that you don't notice any muscle movement at all. So that being only a few years ago, I guess that's the most recent physical challenge I've had. Okay, I can't think of a specific time that I laughed so hard I cried. I tend to, this is, I wish people would know that I'm not a very stoic, maybe that's a good word for it, unemotional person. I don't want to say I'm very emotional. My emotions are channeled and I feel them very much. I don't know if people get that about me just looking at me, looking at these videos. First of all, these videos, I should say, these videos are challenging in the sense that I'm trying to talk to a camera. I'm trying to talk to you, but what I'm actually doing is talking to a camera, and I'm trying to express myself better. It's a little uncomfortable sitting in the corner here, so that plays some part. Okay, getting back to the question, I don't tend to laugh so hard I cry, but if I have, I know I have, I just can't think of the moments. I know they would have been with good friends and I felt comfortable being around people, being around friends, and that let me to express myself more outwardly. Okay, this is probably the easiest question to answer. I think people, close friends who know me well, it doesn't take that long, but I think they know me very well. They would describe me as smart. They would describe me as, I should describe what I mean by smart. Those are just quick terms people throw around. They would describe me as competent and capable of living independently. They would describe me, which I think all these things are pretty accurate about myself, because I'm pretty open. So the people who know me well would have a good sense of me. That I'm capable of being very creative, that I enjoy creativity above anything else, that I have a good sense about things, and I can, if left alone and I had to get through some difficulty, that I can reason my way through, and that I would, this is not me describing myself, but I guess maybe it is. Friends would just know me very well. I can get through something on my own, and I don't know about my mom playing such a big influence on me. They wouldn't describe me as a mama's boy. My mom, by the way, is deceased. They would describe me as happy. I'll go with the easy stuff. They would describe me as happy, happy-go-lucky. I'm flexible. I can adjust my schedule to accommodate somebody. I'm willing to push myself in order to help somebody, extend myself in order to help someone. I want to give full answers to these questions. I'm happy. I'm caring, compassionate, and creative and smart. People mention smart quite a bit. I remember in high school, well, basically all the way through school, I didn't socialize because I didn't see how I could fit in or how I could join in. I didn't see really anything in common with the other people in school, the other classmates. And then afterwards, maybe beginning like 10 years afterwards, something like that, 15 years later, people would tell me, send me messages in Facebook or whatever, saying that they wish they had known me better and that I was smart and intelligent and had interesting, well, one person said I had interesting outlooks on life. I guess that's the way people, most friends who know me well, would describe me. Oh, wow, this is a good, easy question I can answer. I didn't pick these questions with a specific purpose. I didn't edit out really good questions for the sake of myself looking good. Excuse me. Trying to talk off the cuff, not with any editing, but I will answer the question. The 1980s comes to mind and the 1960s. I'll tell you why. I thought sometime back, I thought if I could be born in an earlier era, what would it be? And I think I picked something like 1940 something, which would enable me to have not fought in World War II, but I would have been about 20 something in the 1960s. I grew up on 1960s television and 1980s television. I wasn't exposed so much to the music of the 1960s. I grew up during the 80s music, so I really love 80s music. I really love 80s TV shows and sitcoms, dramas and sitcoms. I like Star Trek. I like Get Smart. I like all those shows, 60s and 80s. So if I were to go back in time, I would pick either of those two eras. I don't like the idea of having to fight in the Vietnam War. Aside from that, I think the 1960s were an exciting time, an innovative time. There was exciting stuff on TV. There was interesting music. I think there were interesting ideas that were developing. My concept of the 1960s is an era of people freeing up, and not just the hippie movement, but I think the hippie movement was one expression of this loosening up and questioning the times, the 1950s and so forth. For example, in television alone, you saw in the 1950s, it was pretty much sitcoms. Family sitcom, and typical stuff. And then in the 1960s, you see shows like Bewitched, where there's an interesting twist on it wasn't even a family sitcom. It was an interesting twist on a married couple. She was a witch, and she had these sorcery powers, these witchy powers, and it's an interracial marriage, which was an issue coming to prominence at the time. So I think of the 1960s in terms of TV as not only innovative, you had shows like Get Smart and so forth, and Star Trek, and Twilight Zone had just ended at that time. Going into the 60s, it was right at the peak between the 1959 or something and early 1960s. But television shows were more brave. I guess they felt more brave to explore cultural issues and discuss things. And to sidetrack a little bit, I enjoy shows that explore our times and aren't afraid to just be typical cookie cutter type plot lines, cookie cutter type setups. You had Get Smart, which is about a secret service, something like the CIA, only it poked fun. It was a parody of an organization like the CIA. And shows at that time were more daring. You also had I Dream of Jeannie, which was similar to Bewitched in certain sense. You had a show about a talking car that didn't last long, but at least they tried. And you had the Munsters and the Addams Family, which were in some sense parodies of the typical family sitcom. So that's one way in terms of TV. In terms of music, you had, I think, a time then, of course, people quibble. Rock and roll came in maybe 1955, something like that. Bill Haley in the comments. But I see the 1960s as being innovative in terms of rock and roll music, in terms of inventing new sounds and experimenting. And you had the duck walk. I'm not sure if the duck walk was in the 50s or 60s, but it was an era where I was born in 1975, the end of 1975, so I hadn't even been alive at the time. But I see it as an era of people, of society loosening up and becoming open and not afraid to experiment. And I think some of the best stuff we had was in the 1960s. My favorite president was John F. Kennedy, and he himself, leading his administration, was innovative and not afraid to rethink and reassess how the government does things. One of my favorite moments in history, this is becoming like a history thing, but one of my favorite moments in history was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there was a period of time when I was very fascinated by it, by that crisis, and I learned a lot about it. I was an aspiring film screenwriter, and I wanted to write a film about it, a drama depicting it. And it would be shifting back and forth. The movie would be shifting back and forth between the Soviet Union and the United States. And so I heard and read transcripts of these committee meetings that President Kennedy would have. And he wasn't afraid to question the military hawks who were so eager to create more of a war out of this, or more of a physical conflict with this. And he was questioning what would happen if the United States did this, for example, bomb targets in Cuba. What would the Soviet Union do as a response? And I think of him as a very forward-thinking president, as a very unique president in the sense that he questioned what we were doing. He didn't want to he seemed, from what I've read and been exposed to, he didn't want to simply follow suit. He seemed to be a president that started fresh and wanted to improve things in the country. He bravely spoke on TV about race relations. I remember at one point he said, if we truly believe, and this is the 1960s, if we truly believe that blacks and whites are equal, then how many of us would choose to be black? He actually came on television and said that. And he gave aid to foreign countries. I believe he gave aid to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And so we had an exciting president, an exciting administration. It was nicknamed Camelot because Camelot was a movie that had just come out. And I like when we have a president like that that's not afraid to question things. The music I've talked about, the television, the movies, there were exciting films at the time. And I see the 1970s as like a carryover from that. But I see the 1980s as 20 years later, it's roughly a generation, as having been influenced from people who grew up during the 1960s. I see some of the same things in the 1980s that I did in the 1960s. So there's your answer. I was thinking of making a list of these names, but I am such so much involved in just talking off the cuff and telling you that I didn't bother making the list. Right off the bat, I can think of Madonna, Steven Spielberg, perhaps Einstein. I can think of whoever group or whoever wrote the Torah in the Jewish Bible. I can't. My mind trails off about people that immediately come to mind. I like to talk with former President Clinton or President Kennedy for the reasons, in terms of Kennedy, for the reasons I mentioned my previous question. I'll stick with Madonna, Steven Spielberg, and the one who wrote the Bible, one or people who wrote the Bible, and perhaps Einstein. Madonna, I had a crush on her in the 1990s when I was in college. I think she's very creative. She's very smart. She's sexy as all get out. And she's not afraid to embody that sexiness. I would like to talk with her primarily because she's involved not only in music, she's very passionate clearly about music, but she's passionate about films. She's acted in films. She directed a film. I see her as very much a creative person and, just basically a creative person. And I've wondered, like in my mind, I don't know if any of you have done this, but you probably have somebody in mind you think about talking with, somebody famous. And what I do is imagine myself talking with the person and thinking of possible answers they'd give back. Sometimes answers that I'd like them to give back. It's sometimes bitter when I think of something I'd like the person to reply back with, the thing that I'd like the person to reply back with, and knowing they would probably, or suspecting they would probably say something else. I wish that if I did talk with her, that she would see my imagination, my creativity, and she would appreciate that, and we could have like a meeting of the minds and maybe dance or something, go on a date, something like that. Okay, on to Steven Spielberg. For a lot of the same reasons as with Madonna, a very creative person, very passionate about film, and also something that I don't know if I'll get a chance to say again, but when I watch him in interviews talk, tripping over my words, talking about his films, he talks very expertly about how he set up the shot as a director, and he shows a lot of wisdom. He voices a lot of wisdom, not just from past experience, but I think an intuitive sense on filmmaking. I think he stands above and beyond some of the other film directors. I haven't studied the other film directors as much as I've paid attention to him. I've looked a bit at Stanley Kubrick and some others, but Steven Spielberg, I grew up with Steven Spielberg. I grew up with Jim Henson. I grew up with the creations of Steven Spielberg and Jim Henson, and there's Gene Roddenberry too, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg were pals, clearly. So I grew up with them, so I feel some bond already. But Steven Spielberg, I think, not only has some past experience, wisdom from past experience, but I think has a good intuition about how shots should be set up and the look of a film. And okay, this is what I was about to say before. growing up with these people, the works of these people, he portrayed children and he portrayed people as real people, and they weren't stiff. You could sense that they were real people. Like, for example, children. He didn't have the children talking in ways that an adult would script children to say. He put in curse words. He would put in slang. I don't know how much dialogue was the responsibility of him or the responsibility of people writing the script, but he was heavily involved in the production of the film, so I can't help but think that he was involved in how the actors portrayed the characters. And I like his nostalgia that comes through in films about nice suburban home life. And from what I've read about his growing up, his experiences growing up, I like the fact that he grew up in a suburban area. He somewhat identified as Jewish as a child, and more so clearly later on in life. He wasn't, and of course later on in life, I'm happy that he embraced it in his films, his Jewish identity, and not only that, but his other aspects of himself in his films. And he was genuinely a very enthusiastic, very impassioned person, and very adventurous and fun-loving. And that comes clearly through in his films like Indiana Jones and The Goonies and so forth. And based just on that, I'd like to talk with him about things like that, and about his Jewish identity, what he sees as being Jewish, and I'm Jewish, and I'd like to share thoughts with him on that. He grew up to be an Eagle Scout, and I stayed in and became an Eagle Scout. And I think some of the things he grew up with, not necessarily the shows or the things that he grew up with, were the same because we grew up in different eras. Our childhoods were spent in different eras. I think his would have been in the 1950s. Mine would have been in the 1980s. But I think we had similar kinds of toys we gravitated towards, and that would have, of course, led to our outlooks on life. And I'd like to see, same thing with Madonna, I'd like to see what differences we had in outlooks. Again, a meeting of the minds. Okay, so moving on to Einstein, I said perhaps, let me skip over to the one who wrote the Torah, the one or people who wrote the Torah. I don't know who they are, but I've known that from studying the Torah and Kabbalah that there are many different levels of depth in terms of interpretation, clearly intentional interpretation in the Torah. I'd like to ask, I'll just presume for this question, it's one person who wrote the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch. I would like to ask this person, male or female, I don't know who, I'd like to ask this person what inspired this creation to come about, and of course certain things I'd like to ask, like what was meant by this, and was there anything skipped out of the final product? And for example, I'm studying, and I intend to do a future video explaining a theory somebody developed. Actually, 2 different people developed 2 different theories, but they kind of meld together on what the structure of the Torah is. Clearly intentional from the beginning. It's clearly patterned this way and structured this way, and it's a hidden pattern. I've talked about it before, and I want to, as soon as I get a nice green background, that I can display things on digitally, and have more ability to show features in these YouTube videos. Basically, when the quality of my and sophistication of my videos becomes better, I'd like to do these. I'd like to do these videos. I'd like to do a video explaining the Torah in depth. I'd like to see if my answers were correct. I'd like to ask this person. My interpretations of the Torah were correct. And Einstein, of course, was Jewish as well. I put him in because of the different theoretical physicists. He's Jewish, for example. Well, there are a lot of Jewish physicists, theoretical physicists. Something I'm proud of, being Jewish. That I'm in the company. My kinship, my kin, are very smart, and an abnormally large amount of them have won. I've heard have won Nobel prizes, and they're very open-minded. And I think there's something about Judaism that encourages one to think imaginatively and just think more broadly. And I'm deviating into talking about Jewish heritage. I won't. I don't have a clear answer as to why Einstein. I was wondering about Steven Weinberg and other people. I'll just say because, well, they are Jewish. They all are Jewish. I guess because he was very innovative, he developed two theories of relativity, and I guess maybe I should just lump these together: Steven Weinberg, Albert Einstein, and a few other people that are not coming to mind immediately. I'd like to interview the theoretical person who's Jewish, who thinks in open-minded ways, who launched us forward in our understanding of physics and the universe. I'd even like to interview J. Robert Oppenheimer. I think I have some similarity in terms of personality traits. Well, what got me was my mom. That was a chuckle. That wasn't a cough. My mom told me way back in 2000 something or other that J. Robert Oppenheimer was a close relative of ours. I question that. I don't see how either he or his sister of his or somebody could have been related to us. Certainly, we're both Jewish. I do see some traits that are similar. This is deviating off the topic, but I see. All right, I'll finish with this. Some traits that I see in common with J. Robert Oppenheimer, because of course the film Oppenheimer came out and people are, I guess, learning for the first time about him. I see somebody who's very creative, imaginative, who instinctively tends to think in solitude, tends to think very deeply about topics, who tends to be, seems odd people seeing the movie Oppenheimer, but I think there was an emotional aspect to him, and I think the emotional aspect and the creative aspect meld together, and I see that in myself. And that's probably because I don't tend to exhibit my emotionality outwardly, but I'm very fun-loving. I smile when I'm around people. And this is getting off into other topics, so I'll just stop it here. I can't just think of one thing, so I'll just rattle off several things immediately come to mind. First thing that came to mind is sometime in my past, I've had a rough experience with somebody, and this is recorded. I had a rough experience with somebody, and it's been kind of hot and cold. And what would make my day today would be, one of the things certainly would be if the person reached out to me and we were able to make amends. I'll just leave it at that. If I had oodles of money, of course, but maybe I would put that at the bottom of the list, below what I just mentioned about this other person. And certainly, if I had a lot of money, I'd be able to use the money towards an end. Um, if I were to travel different places, this is very much a bucket list. I created a bucket list some years back. It was my birthday, and somebody asked, "What would you like?" Presumably as a gift. And I thought, well, rather than naming things people could buy me, I decided to make a bucket list of really, really important things I want. I want more connection with my extended family, my cousins. All right, what would really make my day if I could meet my cousins in person, all of them, any of them? If I could travel to New York or Los Angeles, if I could go sightseeing, if I could, this friend that I mentioned earlier could make amends, like we could make amends. The person could reach out to me. If I could learn something about my mom, she's deceased, that would clarify something, some various gaps that I wish I had asked her at the time. If I could live in a house, if I could own a house, rather than just this apartment, I'm working towards that. And I'm getting into bucket list territory, but excuse me, I don't see the difference between in terms of this question. If I could go sightseeing in Los Angeles, New York, if I could meet somebody famous that I mentioned before, I admire, I guess I'll leave it at that. Okay, I guess this is pretty straightforward. In somewhere in high school, I saw a contortionist on TV, and there's a little bit of sexual attraction there. And I tried to become a contortionist. I tried to exercise, I mean, just on my bed and so forth. But I'd say the weirdest talent I have, and it's something I am proud of, is female impersonation. I developed a look. I've appeared before on this channel and looked through the channel. I think I'm really proud about creating an illusion that I'm a female, and going around, like going in public, and I'm developing that. I think it's pretty weird. I've had a few first jobs. Depends on what you mean by first job, okay? I didn't really have a job until, well, it was volunteer. It depends on whether you mean paid or you mean just a job, like a job you show up to work and you do your job and you go home on a regular basis. I think it was freshman year, maybe sophomore year, I became a cameraman for a pilot of an interview. Okay, all right. The university where I would later go to school, different building, different department. It was the education department, which oddly was doing an interview. I remember it as being something like a pilot for a show, but it was something akin to a PBS type show. There was a stage, and there were two chairs, and there was somebody interviewing someone else about medical issues. And I was in a spot right from the beginning, like my early childhood. I wanted to be a writer of television, and then I wanted to grow up and become something like Rod Serling. I wanted to do what Rod Serling did professionally, or Gene Roddenberry. I wanted to create television shows that were memorable. And so I was able to get hired. I wasn't paid, but I was a volunteer for Camera 2, and it was a two-camera operation. And from what I've heard, the person in charge was questioning whether I was up to being able to do it because I was in freshman year or junior year, somewhere in there. But I'm inclined to say sophomore. But I did it, and I had seen television enough to gauge how to aim the camera, how to set up a shot, and I was really proud of myself. I still am proud of myself. The fact that I would practice with the camera. I could move, and I knew how to do a gradual or I'm skipping words at the moment, like the opposite of sudden. I could do a comfortable zoom in shot, comfortable zoom out shot, and I knew cue words, cue lingo, camera lingo, and so forth. So I'm proud of that. And then my first job, I didn't really have a job. Sad to say, this is a reassessment of my life. So I guess I'll say here that I wish I had done more actively in terms of getting work. I didn't see a need really for work. I was focusing so much on developing my writing, if you could call this that, a job, I guess. A lot of times I was writing scripts on my own, and for Night Court and Star Trek The Next Generation I wrote one, and Get Smart, shows, a few shows that were my favorites that were on the air, currently in production. I saw that as my future, and I was looking beyond working at Burger King or a fast food restaurant, not to besmirch Burger King. I saw that as my future, and I saw myself as ahead of the others in my class. So I was focusing on that, and I was trying to get an agent. I was contacting agents. I got a list of literary agents for New York, and then there's another one. It's the East Coast and the West Coast list. And mostly I focused on the West Coast list, California, Hollywood, and so forth. And I was just trying to pitch them these scripts and send them out. So that was another first job. And then after college, during college I interned at a radio station for a little bit. It was a nice thing. I've since, especially recently, I've thought about what prospects I could have, what future I could have in radio, and I do think that that feeds into doing this YouTube channel and making this YouTube channel better and more sophisticated. And I think a lot of people who would listen to radio are now watching YouTube or something akin to YouTube. I also interned at a political office and volunteered afterwards at a political office. I wasn't being paid. And then my first actual, technically paid job was after college, and it was soon after college. I graduated in August 1999, and it was at a business that I'm pretty sure is out of business right now, and I'm not going to say anything that would identify where I'm living, although I've probably given it away before. It was at a small shop. It seemed like it was a one-man operation. He owned it, and I was hired to fix up the website, and that was how he got me in there, I guess. I fixed up the grammar and fixed up the website because I learned, just out of my own curiosity, I learned about C++ programming and HTML and all those things I would put in my resume. And while I wasn't doing that, while I was still on the job, he had me stuffing envelopes or whatever, or putting stamps on envelopes or something. It was basically really, in terms of office work, it was really, really low-level office work. And there weren't that many people working there, maybe a third person or something. But It was clearly going out of business. So after that, then I got a job at a fast food, a local famous fast food restaurant. But in the midst of that, I had my sights set on working in Hollywood, working in a studio, working in television or film, because that's what my one of my two bachelor's degrees had been in, and still is. But I had to save up money, so I worked at about 2 weeks. I worked at a fast food restaurant. I would call it fast food. It wasn't really a fast food restaurant in the sense that it was like Burger King or McDonald's. It was a local combination of like a diner, and basically it had been there for over a century, I think 150 years or something by that point, and people would drive up and come in and pick up food. There was like a lineup, and they specialized in a certain food that might give it away, so I'll leave it at that. And I had that for about 2 weeks, and the person said I wasn't really cut out for this. This isn't really my thing, and they let me go. And then I worked for a couple days overnight at cooking bagels. I didn't really like that job, and then I survived for a few hours at a dog grooming place, and I didn't like the way the other dogs were howling, and just wasn't pleasant. And in my mind, I kept thinking about working at some studio, and then I managed to get a really good job as a videographer intern in Atlanta, Georgia at CNN, and specifically I would be working at CNN International, and I still see this as the high point of my life, high point of my career life so far, because I got to find my own place quickly. I could move out, and I began in December, I think midway through December, right? Or was it 2000? I think I began in 2000, something like that. And because I was given the option of starting in December or January, and I think I picked January because it gave me more time to prepare. I found my own place to live. I lived alone, and that was what I really consider to be my first true job, working at CNN International in Atlanta. I was a teleprompter operator. They called me a videographer, not intern, videographer trainee, but what I was really doing was operating the teleprompter, and that's what started me off. All right. I said earlier that there were things that I wish I had asked my mom when she was alive. That delves into that ties in with this. I grew up with my mom, and I had an experience. I had visits with my dad, maybe a handful of times, like roughly 5 times. I'm trying to figure out, put a timeline to when he visited. I can tell you about my perception of being exposed to them interacting together. My mom could be mild, my mom could be happy and smiling, and my dad was more intellectually, well, they were both very smart. They met in Mensa, and they dated for a while. My dad was somebody who tended to do basically happy-go-lucky, but he wasn't vibrant, jubilant, and so forth. But he was happy-go-lucky, and they were both older in life compared with other people's parents of my generation, my age, my class, my grade. When they were together, sometimes, I'll describe it specifically. My mom tended to be more dominant. My mom tended to tell my dad, well, we need this, we need to do that. She was looking out for what needs to be done. This needs to be done. This needs to be figured out. Oh, what do we do about this? And my dad seemed more, at least towards me, my dad seemed more compliant or working with her. And I remember sometimes when my mom would shout at my dad, adamantly, not just yelling, just she wouldn't curse or anything, but her voice would go up, and I remember her. I won't give her out their names, but at least for this video anyway. But she would say his name, and then she would say something like, "I'm talking about this. We have to deal with this," well, this can't be right. This has to be fixed. Something like that. I remember her saying that, and then I remember him saying, "All right, darling, all right." Other times, well, I remember growing up, he didn't live with us, but he would send us letters. He would send letters addressed to my mom, speaking more objectively. I'm sorry that money is tight right now. I couldn't be able to send you more, and please tell Jeffrey that I'm proud of him for such and such, or achieving the high grade in contest, something or other at school. And he would send me books to read, interesting books to read, and some not so interesting at the time, a lot not so interesting at the time. And sadly, when I moved, I left a lot of books behind. That was the relationship. I never saw them as a loving couple. They were just cooperative partners in my upbringing, and cooperative partners in terms of dealing with things in life, I guess. Just finding somebody. I didn't think about dating, really. I didn't think I was attractive, first of all. Growing up, I didn't think I was attractive. I knew I had good self-esteem. I had healthy self-esteem, but I didn't think girls were attracted to me. And through school, and then senior year, I tried to branch out, and I think there were mixed results from that. But that led me to making a more conscientious effort online with dating sites like OkCupid and JRetromatch to focus on dating and to find a partner. And I didn't want to waste time with somebody who wasn't Jewish. I didn't want to waste the time of the person who wasn't Jewish, because I see dating as a tryout period in order to find somebody and eventually marry. And maybe this is also because I want very much to marry somebody, and I bond very much with somebody, and I tend to be a type that bonds and reaches out more emotionally, or thinks more deeply about someone else. It seems, based on past friendships or past attempts, seems to, I don't want to say seem needy or become needy, but just, that stereotype of girls thinking about wedding days and romance and so forth. Well, that seems to be my take or my instinct on things. When I meet somebody, and I caution myself not to go overboard, for the sake of protecting my own emotional health, so forth, and being realistic and pragmatic, or whatever the term is. I would hold myself back, but when I see somebody attractive, and when I am intellectually attracted to them too, I fantasize, and I've been lonely, very lonely in terms of dating, very lonely, and I'll get to that in a moment. and desperate in some. I don't want to say desperate. That means I would go for anybody. I mean longing, very longing for somebody. That I would probably be the type. People would probably describe me as putting, like having hopes that are too high, and fantasizing that maybe this could be the one, and so forth. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's hurt some relationships. I should say I haven't had that many relationships, and the ones that I have had didn't go very far. I started off online, and I also reached out to former classmates who were women, not with the intent to necessarily date, but just for female companionship and just to substitute sort of for that. I mean, understanding there were boundaries and impropriety and so forth, I wanted to stay clear from. But I went online, and I also reached out to former people, not just classmates, former people I knew. But anyway, online, there's a filter you can put on, and you can put in terms of finding matches, compatible matches, and I would put in I'm Jewish and looking for someone Jewish, looking for someone female, looking for someone within the same area, like geographic area, and some likes. And women tend to, at least the profiles I've seen, they tended to just have, I like music, I like park walks, I'm cute and I'm looking for somebody nice, and there's not really much you can reply with to something like that. So I tried, and I didn't get anywhere. Maybe once, maybe a fluke, somebody would reply back. And I was sending out messages, like I was sending out replies to posts that women had posted, profiles women had posted. And the matches tended to be, the closest matches tended to be in the Bronx or New York, or tend to be in New York. And that just egged me on to feeling more despair that I wasn't living in New York or Los Angeles or somewhere where there was a bigger Jewish community. And getting back to the question about past relationships, they would get as far, typically, if I did reach out and somebody did, I did find somebody who replied back and reciprocated, sort of. It wouldn't really get further than me telling the person about myself and the other person not really talking about herself. And that's what bothered me. I like somebody who, as long as this is a mock dating video, I might as well mention this, I prefer women who are lively and who talk very much about themselves, but who are also open to listening to to myself, talk about myself, and to ask them questions. I want it to be very reciprocal. And when I've been matched online with these companies, I haven't had much luck at all. I've had a woman who just doesn't say anything about herself and just starts asking, what do you do for a living? Where do you live? And the same almost stinging questions. Like, I have to come up with these explanations. And there was one remarkable experience. There was one remarkable match. She lived in New York, obviously, and so it was long distance. And she said something that surprised me pleasantly. She said she doesn't want a long distance relationship, but that I'm a nice guy. And that really stayed with me. This is over the phone. That I'm a nice guy. She didn't say, oh, go bug off, or I'm not really interested, or she didn't try and ghost me or anything. She said, I'm a nice guy. And I guess if we were living closer together, she may have dated me or gone on a date with me, something like that. So that's a sad aspect. I hopefully I'll find somebody. That's it. I don't have necessarily a favorite song. Well, it's difficult for me, anybody. I don't know. I don't see how anybody can come up with just a favorite song. I want to say that since childhood, sometime maybe in elementary school or certainly middle school, I would play in my mind these songs of hope and inspiration and just to express how I was feeling. I guess inspirational songs. I would walk to school. It was about a quarter of a mile walk, and I would walk to middle school, and I would think of several songs in particular would play through my mind. Dare from the Transformers the movie. If you've heard, please look it up. It's not just a Transformers song. It's an inspirational song in its own right. I have identified some songs that describe me best. I think the song that describes me the best is a song by Rod Stewart called Forever Young. And I know there's at least one other song that's called Forever Young, Alphaville, and there are cover versions of that, but this is different. Look that song up. I think it describes my outlook in life very well. And it's not just my outlook being expressed, but I think in some ways, some magical, nice ways, it's also as if it were being sung by my mom wishing the best for me. And my upbringing, my attitude towards life is very much a product, I think, of my own innate creativity and mind, but I think it's also a product of my mom bringing me up, how she brought me up, and the values she instilled in me, which it's questionable. It's like the question, the chicken or the egg. Did I have those values all along, or were they instilled upon me? I think I had those values. I think they're logical, rational values, like do be kind to other people and so forth. I don't think those are really instilled upon you by someone else. I think if you're smart enough and you're compassionate enough, I think it more depends upon your personality type. Very young. I'd like to do a video on that later on this channel. What was the question? Okay, so Forever Young and later on, and Dare, I remember earlier on was perhaps my biggest motivational song. I would think internally to myself. I like 1980s music in general. Here, I'll mention the bands. All right, Madonna, of course, comes to mind, and Genesis, and a little bit of Patti LaBelle, and what other was Cyndi Lauper, and not so much into Beastie Boys. I don't like rap, although rap. Who's that comedian who started off in rap and then became black-skinned? He became a big I'd say action actor star. I can't think of his name. Sometimes has a mustache. I can't think of his name. Anyway, his kind of rap I like, and I could appreciate and respect NWA type of rap because they're voicing things about the culture that they experienced. I can understand that. I don't gravitate towards that, but I can experience it. And I can appreciate the artisticness in it and the genuineness in it. Okay, I like pop rock. It's popular rock. I mean, I like soft rock. I like Genesis. I like Cyndi Lauper. If I were online, I like Duran. Okay, I like Duran Duran, Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Genesis, and of course one of the singers from Genesis. Peter Gabriel too. I can't think of the name of the singer who was from Genesis. He did Land of Confusion. That should be a good demonstration of my favorite songs. Okay, well, there are a few embarrassing experiences I've had younger in life. I can't think of anything more recently, but maybe the most profound things that happen to you are the ones that happen early in life. I remember being picked on, name-called in school, and I wish I had stood up more. I did stand up a little bit, but I just remember the mockery and name-calling in school. And there was one thing that comes to mind. There was a kid who befriended me, and I thought we were stronger friends. Than, the friendship was stronger than it was, and I don't know why I did this. Really, okay, I can think of two experiences. Um, I This would have been like eighth grade, and I he had this idea that the two of us would go into a comic book store, and with my backpack I could be able to steal some of the comic books. And I did it because for that certain period of time we were friends, and I think even at the time I interpreted him, he seemed to be one of the guys that was more popular. Like, I saw myself as being totally outside anybody's purview of friendship. Just there was me, and then there was everybody else, and I didn't feel like I would. They would let me fit in. They would let me in because I didn't think that they saw me as capable of fitting in. So this is, I guess, a common experience in people's lives. I remember doing it, and it was, and I don't think I was caught. I remember I would have remembered that I wasn't caught, but I feel bad about that, and I wonder why I even did that. And there was another experience in senior year where I did something really foolish and stupid, and it was out of my character totally. And let's see, let me branch off from that question. What was common about these two experiences that I won't talk about later on with senior year? And if you know, you know. It was out of desperation and a longing. In the earlier case, it was a longing for him as a friend. And this next time, it was similar longing for friendship, and being pushed away, and frustration and confusion, and wanting to be able to talk with somebody. So I guess those are similar circumstances, so similar motivations. Okay, I don't have that large a family. I grew up only with my mom, and my dad would occasionally visit. I didn't even have much contact with my relatives or cousins. I wish I did. As a side note, I still see my cousins as living a better life than I had, or at least having more opportunities, richer opportunities than I did. I'm glancing over at the camera there, my preview over there. I'll try not to do that. So what immediately came to mind, however, were sitting around a round table with my mom, and my favorite holidays, of course, are Halloween, because you get all dressed up, and it's very creative and imaginative, and you get to create costumes, and there's all this mythology and lore and vampires and sorcery and witchery and skeletons and the dead, and very philosophical, even philosophical, like how are we irked by our concept of death and overcoming death and all that stuff. And Thanksgiving, because I enjoy having a meal, and sitting around a lot. I wish I could sit around a table with my relatives and have a meal, and that's been one of the bucket list items for myself. And then I thought, what about simple like it says traditional customs or something? I can't remember the question, but maybe the question means what idiosyncratic things have I tended to do with my mom that are unique and memorable, and I think back with fondness over. I remember walking to school. Anytime I would leave, I would stand at the door and about to go out. My mom would wish me so long, but she would say, I'm trying to think of how she would say it. She would say something like "do well" or "have a good." She would say "have a good time," and be back when you can. I don't know if she even said that. It was, I had a very open relationship with my mom. She trusted me very much, and she let me be out for a long period of time, and she trusted that I would contact her if it got too late. I would tell her I'm still here and so forth. And I remember I remember going to the movie theater when I was younger. I would remember going to the movie theater many times to see the same movie over and over, like Transformers. I remember seeing several times with her, and we would stand in line, and I remember, in fact, I remember she didn't drive, she didn't own a car, so we would take the bus, all these different places, we would take the bus together, and I was about to say, the movies I'd seen more than once. I remember Flight of the Navigator, Transformers, Star Trek 4. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind. She would go with me, sitting through it, and not just sitting through it like a just dodgy old parent, whatever, older, elder parent, but she would show interest in what I was passionate about, and interest to the extent that she would learn and she would be aware of, for example, Transformers. She would know Optimus Prime, and she would know Megatron, and she would watch TV shows. That's another thing. This is very easy for me to answer. The two of us enjoyed watching TV, particularly enjoying Star Trek, both the original series and the Next Generation. And we would comment during commercial breaks, and I was very enthusiastic. And if you saw me watching Star Trek, you'd see me alert my cushioned, it was a chair. It wasn't, I think you could actually lean back and it would extend. It was something like a lazy boy chair. The shape of a lazy boy chair. It was cushioned. It was like a rug. It was a upholstered rug type material. And she would sit in her chair, same type of chair. And if you could see me, I wasn't this stern person, or I wasn't like the kid that you might have seen in school. I was alert, and I was poised, and I was watching every moment of the Star Trek episode, and especially the Next Generation, where it was new to me. I hadn't seen these several times before in repeats. And if it were a new episode, I would point out, hey, wait a minute, look at that. What was that? Oh, I bet Picard is going to do this. And not only was I saying these things very enthusiastically, but my mom would be more relaxed in the way she said it, but she would sit there relaxed, and she would either be focused on the screen. She would, well, anyway, blah, blah, blah. She was either focused on the screen or talking to me. How's that for 3D? Maybe I could experiment with creating how to do a 3D effect. That'd be interesting for a YouTube channel video. Anyway, she would calmly say, I think Picard's going to do this, or I was just very enthusiastic and on my seat, kind of like the way guys watch, or I shouldn't gender stereotype, but the way people watch football games or sports games. I wasn't a sports game person at all. I didn't really find fascination with watching sports, but with Star Trek, that was something different. I watched it with that kind of activeness, activity, active persona, spirit, that active spirit. So what other traditions, what other customs did my mom and I have? On the bus, I'd say that's about it for right now. Questions that would bring out aspects of myself that I suspect don't normally come out, at least when people first meet me. Maybe I'm wrong. As a side note, I started a new job, and I was proud of the fact that I could come up with quick wit, display quick wit, and I picked up on the tasks very well, and they're still complimenting me on it. I've been there 3 days at my new job, and I'm proud and I'm very grateful that they immediately noticed these things about me. So there's that disconnect between what I perceive and what other people perceive me, or apparently they've said that they perceive in me. This ties in with the second question. that was asked, which was, what would friends, how would friends describe me? These new coworkers don't know me very well, don't know me hardly, know me hardly at all, but they quickly picked up how smart I was. So I'm not bragging myself. I'm simply saying they remarked how smart I was and how technically inclined I was and how quickly I picked up on tasks and was able to learn fast and to do things well quickly. Okay, going back to questions about me, I had a question in mind that I wanted to mention. Yes, what is the best? Oh, I'm sorry, that's a different question. What question do you wish people would ask you? Uh, Something like that. It would be a question eliciting my creativity to talk about creative projects I'm working on. I guess it would be, if you're looking for one question specifically, it would be that. Okay, so here's a quick answer. Two aspects. One, enjoying television, enjoying the shows I grew up with. I'm trying to get back to that. I'm trying to steer away, deviate away from just getting addicted to watching YouTube all the time. I want to reinvigorate my soul. I should mention that Saturdays are a time religiously that I do not work. What do you enjoy doing on your time off or on your day off? And being Jewish, I very much respect the Sabbath and I honor the Sabbath. It's one of the commandments, and I think Judaism in general, the commandments in Judaism are very practical for the most part, very practical, and they deal with real life. And I think that the Sabbath was put in. One good reason that the Sabbath, I don't know necessarily why the Sabbath was put in, but one good benefit of the Sabbath is that you're commanded not to do certain types of work. Of course, I kind of cheat. I turn on the TV, which technically is causing an electrical spark. And in the Talmud, somewhere, I think in the Talmud, it says, what are the 39? It says something like, what constitutes work? And there are 39, traditionally considered 39 different things that you are not supposed to do because they are creative work. And one of them is creating a spark. Another one is spending money. Another one is traveling distances, certain distance beyond, traveling for a certain length of distance. And those ones, I admit, I haven't observed in terms of the Sabbath. But in general, I explain it away. Like I come up with an explanation for, like there's a term for it, an excuse for it. I excuse it away because the television that I'm watching, technically I'm creating a spark, but the television, by turning it on, but the television I'm watching reinvigorates my soul. And there's a phrase in the Torah where it refers to the nefesh, which is the part of the soul that's connected with the body. It's translated as soul, and that that Yud He Vav He, God, basically, nefeshed, and I interpret this to mean that he got in touch with his soul, or he acquired a soul, or something like that. And I think that these television shows I grew up with, The Munsters, Star Trek, what other, Bosom Buddies, Leave It to Beaver, these shows reawaken in me that fun-loving aspect, that part of my truest self, the soul, so to speak. So I see that it's reinvigorating my soul by doing that. And if I buy something, technically I'm using money, but I'm buying something that I care very much about and I love. And trying to think of what was the. Oh, what do you do on your day off? Okay, well, I probably answered some question later on. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, enjoy watching TV, and typically on a day off, I enjoy watching TV and watching those things. Mystery Science Theater 3000 and my DVD collection, and reading books, nonfiction books. I don't read fiction books really. I like reading about UFOs. I should, maybe that should become more of an aspect of my life again. And I also, using my day off, knowing that I can wipe away the makeup, I like to dress up in en femme, cross dress, not just cross dress, but like develop the makeup and so forth. If I really know that I don't have to be anywhere, that's my one time to be able to do that and build up practice, and I'm proud of it. What immediately comes to mind is, of course, what the question means by vary. I would say what immediately came to mind was when my cousin, my first cousin, reached out to me. Well, I reached out to him, but he replied back, and that was very meaningful. I guess overall, it's been the cousins in general, like him, my first cousin, and his wife and daughter and son. Collectively, there's been a period of a few years. If you collectively put that together, that's been my the most recent time when I felt that I can think of that I felt very happy, not just happy but very happy, because I felt very relieved. This is towards the end of my mom's life. I didn't know that these were the remaining. I had some sense that these were the remaining years of her life, but that it doesn't play that much in so much as just I mention it because I had just grown up with her, and she would tell me stories about my cousin and her brother, who would be my cousin's father, and primarily that, and I learned online, not from them, but I just online, social media. I learned about a little bit about their lives, and I wanted so much to have a larger family and to have more contact with my extended relatives, my cousins. I don't know how much contact other people have with their cousins and extended family, but I see myself as very different, unfortunately, as not having had that, not having lucked out in that aspect. So that was it. And also, I should mention, I felt very grateful to them for acknowledging me and in that way understanding my needs to feel like I'm in a larger family beyond just my mom. Okay, this is a very interesting way in which interesting way in which I can answer this. I can tell you that there are some books that I read that opened my eyes into how to interpret things. I mentioned before the Torah. There's a book I read online that gave me a whole new perspective on the structure, the hidden structure of the Torah. There's that, and there's another one. There's a book by Stan Tenen called "The Alphabet That Changed the World," which provided a new interpretation of the Hebrew alphabet and Kabbalah and so forth. And I guess I could say the Kabbalistic text. I say ancient, the oldest one being dated to about 2,000 years ago. That made a profound impact upon me because, number one, I could read the Hebrew. I read English translations as well, but they were very different from the way texts are normally written, and it's a sense of honor that I was able to read these texts, Kabbalistic texts, They mean a lot to Judaism. They're part of Judaism, a very respected part of Judaism. Um, Aside from that, so there are the eye-opening ones. Then there's a book that I borrowed so many times as a child. Um, and I love ghosts. I love reading about ghosts. I love reading about UFOs. So that's another thing that I want to talk about in terms of profound things, books I've read. There's not just one book. As a child, I love to read adult books about UFOs. Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek and a host of other. Go look these up. You probably wind up reading books about UFOs for little kids or something. It's dumbed down, but J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée immediately come to mind, and Leonard Sternfield, something like that. Anyway, I've forgotten a lot of them. I remember the books themselves. UFOs Behind the Iron Curtain and Beyond Earth, and these are nonfiction books, UFO research. Those are the ones, the UFO Encyclopedia and so forth. And I love those, I cherish those books, that book collection, and Ghosts as well. And I borrowed the Ghostly Register sometime, probably either in later elementary school or in middle school. I borrowed it so many times that I eventually bought it. Go look up what that is. It's a directory of several cases from around the United States, and it presents like a dossier of a particular haunted place, and a dossier on another haunted place, supposedly haunted, alleged haunted place, so forth. I love that, and I should also mention that it changed your life, I guess. I remember the early books about Star Trek changed my life because I just become interested in Star Trek. I remember the Star Trek, Alan Sherman, I think was a comedian. Alan Asherman wrote a book about Star Trek. I remember David Gerrold writing The World of Star Trek, and his book, specifically as a writer, as an aspiring TV series writer, I liked David Gerrold's The Trouble with Tribbles, which was a book about his experience as somebody living in Los Angeles, aspiring to write a TV episode for Star Trek. He became interested in Star Trek, and that's in the first chapter, second chapter. And then for the rest of the book, he talks about the steps he took in writing the episode and the exposure he had to how they were producing the episode and so forth. And that was, in my sense, in what I would call, to me, that was like a Bible, a writer's Bible of what to expect. What's the procedure like? Those are the books that immediately come to mind that had the most profound. I hope I'm not forgetting the question, but those were the books, not just that was the book. Those were the books that had the most profound effect on me. That I think anyway. Right now, a number of things I could think of in my life may not have been actual decisions, in that I didn't have much control over this situation. But what immediately comes to mind is certainly people advising me as my mom got older, advising me that to consider putting her, I hate to even say it, putting her in an elder home or something like that for care. And she was very ambulatory. She was very alert and aware, and she would walk around even later on in life. And I'm going off on a tangent, but I like to think of it as a decision I made. I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with her. We're going to stick together and continue living together in the same home. And I'm glad that I don't know if I necessarily made a decision there or whether it was out of my control at all, but I I I think that I decided to do that, and I'm proud of that because uh, now since she's been gone, I spent that much more time with her, and I have a clear conscience in that I didn't feel like there may have been some disloyalty. I didn't hurt her in any way by having her live somewhere else because she was very concerned that I would she sometimes she I think there's a little bit of paranoia in her, but or fright that um, that I would send her away somewhere, or that she was very concerned that I would move away and I would move to Los Angeles. I kept saying several times through life especially when I felt behind the other kids in my class, and of course after school, I mean post school, post graduation, but I would check up on what they were doing on social media. Not that I would check up, but things you would find out things about other people from your class, and they seemed to be moving forward in life, and I felt that I wasn't living my true self if I wasn't going into film or television as a career. And I was so hell-bent is a weird word, but I was so forthright and ambitious, and I felt like I was being uh, stuttered. I felt like I was being held back, stifled. I was being stifled by not being able to live in Los Angeles or New York. And she would say, "Oh, you're not going to go to New York. You're not going to leave me." She would phrase it various ways. "You're not going to leave me, are you? Or you're not going to go to New York, are you? Or whatever, live far away." And she would come up with these excuses, these explanations, which seemed reasonable too, why I shouldn't just move out. But in retrospect, I stayed with her, and I provided for her financially, and she provided comfort, and she did, of course, earlier on, provide enormously financially for me. So I saw it as a partnership and cooperation. It's more than just a partnership or cooperation. It's like a bond and a trust and all sorts of different things between us. A tight familial relationship. So I guess that's the best decision, I guess. I don't tend to remember or dwell on unhappy, unpleasant things in my life, but the scariest thing, I suppose, have been moments when I felt there wasn't any future. I guess my mom passing, I discovered my mom dead in the morning, and that was October 2018. October 19th is the morning I found her like that. And then November, I spent my birthday during that month, and looking forward to living in the house myself and developing myself as an independent. Well, I have always been an independent person, but I mean like living beyond her death and developing and maturing and growing. So we all should do, no matter what your age, we should be maturing and developing. And then December 1st, I got a notice saying you have to move out in 30 days. And that was really, really scary. And I was with a friend who was helping me move, and I got a call from the landlord who said, "When are you haven't found a place yet? It's been only 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks. Why haven't you moved out yet?" And I was given a month, and part of me emphatically, conscientiously, concertedly freaked out publicly. I wanted people to know what pain I was going through, and so my friend eventually noticed I was distressed and called 911 or something, and a couple of cops came, and they asked, would you like to go somewhere and rest or whatever. I'm embarrassed really to talk about this, but I so in a I won't give the name of it, but basically a hospital. There's a mental health part of the hospital, and there's a physical. The hospital is known for having a mental health part and a physical recuperation part. So I won't give away the name, but I just sat there and I really wanted to talk to somebody. My mom had died sometime. I felt all alone. My sense of my future wasn't there anymore. It was like cut off, and like it was like happier times seemed to be behind me. I didn't know how I would be able to cope with this. I had to move all the stuff out of a house quickly without any job, without any place to go, and out on the street and so forth. So I guess that's the scariest time. Oh my gosh. Well, money has had such a big impact on my life negatively for so long. Not having a lot of money, growing up, not having a lot of money, um, it's it's affected my life in perhaps irrevocable ways. Um, I wanted so much during. I've already told you about how I aspired to be a television writer and eventually a creator. And I think, well, excuse me for jumping around a little bit. I'll try to be coherent. um, but as a child, like our natural, uh, our natural being comes out if well. It's like a flower. Like if well watered, we bloom and blossom. And I was doing that, but I didn't have the resources, and that's affected me dramatically in life. In elementary school, and especially middle school and high school, I saw myself as doing more, being more capable, or being more forth, having more forethought and more awareness of what I wanted to do in life. I think at the time I I thought I was more forward thinking than my classmates when it came to preparing for my future career. I was so ambitious, and I would watch TV, and I would watch it not just to be entertained, but to do that for a living. And I caught just watching TV alone, like I mentioned earlier about camera angles and so forth. I picked up on that very quickly and stunted. That was the word, stunted. In my previous question, I mentioned I tried to say like stuttering, stifled or something. I think stunted was the word I was trying to think of. And when I went to college, fortunately, it was in the area. It's a good school for television, radio, film, public communications in the field, but I didn't have the money nor the resources to be able to actually go further out. If money weren't a thing, I would have gone to Los Angeles like in a heartbeat. Like I was really raring to go, and like Madonna moves to New York City with hardly anything. Of course, that's the story that was popularly told, and I suppose what she liked to promulgate. She had things well prepared. She had resources, so it's unfair to compare my experience with hers. But at the time, especially, I thought that that was true, and I wished that I could move to Los Angeles. Okay, if money weren't a factor, I would have gone to Los Angeles for college, and I would have gone to a great film school, and I would have made contacts, and I would have, being in Los Angeles or New York, I would have met Jewish people. I would have dated, and I would have gotten married. I would have been married by now. I would have a house, and I would have I would have a son, probably, or daughter. Which I would child. I always think of a son because I'm a guy. I don't know. And for those of you who have seen the Dick Van Dyke Show, um, I saw my future. I'd grown up on these shows. I saw my future as my future life as being like what's depicted in the Dick Van Dyke Show, and the relationship with my wife as being something like in Bewitched between Darren and Samantha. And there's a TV show that lasted only half a season, 1982 to 1983, that I've just begun watching. It's called Tucker's Witch, and it shows a very romantic, like a couple that's very tight and together and loving towards each other. And I wish I could have found a partner like that. All these opportunities would have been open to me had money not been a factor at all. I would have been able to meet more people. So in a nutshell, that's it. I don't consider myself a pet lover. I haven't really had pets. It's a pretty easy question to answer. I vaguely remember my mom having a dog when I was born and in my early years of life. I mean, really early years of life, and then the dog died. And then I had 2 fish somewhere in early elementary school. That didn't last long. I had a fish bowl, and I remember being in a different area, and there a neighbor had a child, and I think we were about the same age. He had poodles, and they would jump up, and they had like red around their mouth or something, as if I thought about like blood or something. And I feel icky around cats and dogs particularly because they scratch, and I wear nice clothes, and I have so many delicate things, not necessarily delicate, I have so many things that I want to keep in excellent condition, and I'm so concerned, very, very concerned about them scraping things, damaging things, because I guess cats and dogs can do that. It's possible. And of course, then there's the cleaning up after them and walking them, and so many responsibilities. I mean, I want a child. I don't want a pet like a dog or a cat. And I'm comfortable living on my own. I've done it since 2018, really 2019. I'm comfortable living by myself. I don't need a pet to keep me company. There was somebody in a coworker in a former job who suggested that I get some kind of small animal. Like she suggested, she said that, and then I said, I live in an apartment, and she said, you could get a guinea pig or something. I can't remember what she said exactly, but I don't like feeding animals, the responsibility of feeding small animals. A child is different because I see a potential in the child growing up and becoming an adult, and it's a good, healthy responsibility to instill certain values and keep the child healthy and so forth, and part of our human population. But there's very much a disconnect between myself and animals. I've said a few times that I have so much respect for dogs that I'd rather they run around wild and free than stay cooped up in a house. And it seems so weird. I've had friends who have had dogs and cats, and a close friend of mine, I think back to my earlier very close friend in earlier elementary school. I think he may have had pets. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if he had a pet cat or something or not. I don't. It's something actually I'd like to ask. And doing this video, it's introspective and so forth. I'd like to ask him. Now I can. I'm going to ask him. I'm going to text him. Did you have a pet when you were a child? I sort of remember that now. It never occurred to me because the two of us would always talk so much. But I remember other friends typically having dogs. And I remember later in life, an older friend and the older friend had a dog and I think some cats and still has a cat. Anyway, I would see them cooped up, and I wanted them to rather run free and be dogs, or I guess cats tend to sit around, but I'm more of a dog person. I can't really relate that well to a cat because a cat is by the cat self and just sits there and walks on your keyboard or something really annoying. So I've heard. And a dog, I think I can relate to better because the dog communicates with you. There's more a sense of bonding with the person. So if I had to have a pet, if I had to have a large pet, I guess a chimpanzee would be really awkward or weird. I would pick a dog, but I'm not in a situation to have a dog. Steven Spielberg, straight off. Steven Spielberg. I should also say early on in childhood, it's a combination. I'm talking like age 7 and 8. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, because of Star Wars, George Lucas, because of a number of movies. Well, I'll answer that in a bit, but a host of movies, Steven Spielberg, because of Star Wars, George Lucas, because of the Muppets, Jim Henson, and the innovations that Jim Henson brought to puppetry. George Lucas, just because Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. What about Steven Spielberg? His innovations. That's an interesting question. I hadn't seen the Goonies yet, and I hadn't seen Jaws for at least a couple of decades. What about Steven Spielberg really attracted me? Maybe I wasn't so much a fan of Steven Spielberg. I liked Indiana Jones. All right, regardless of who I'm talking about, I liked the Muppets. These are people who were artists behind the scenes, but what was most prominent was the Muppets, and then later on Star Trek. The Muppets, Star Wars, a little bit later on Star Trek, and Ghostbusters. I'd seen a few years later in life, so I can't count that. But the 1980s special effects types of movies. I hadn't seen E.T. either. I hadn't seen the Goonies. I guess that's it. What movies had Steven Spielberg been involved with? Indiana Jones. He was just a presence on TV, like in film talk in general, and I'm sure I had seen him on TV and I had heard about him. I was quick to say Steven Spielberg. Certainly later on in life, for all those reasons I've given earlier in this video, Steven Spielberg. But I can't think of, other than Indiana Jones and Gremlins. I remember enjoying Gremlins. I remember enjoying Supergirl and the Superman movies, a couple of Superman movies that had been out. I'd seen on TV. And Jim Henson, maybe Jim Henson and George Lucas were more profound at the time in terms of an impact upon me than Steven Spielberg. I guess at the time in my childhood, George Lucas and Jim Henson were my biggest role models at the time, even though I didn't think of them as artists or role models. I liked what they created, Star Wars and the Muppets. And those were more of serving as role models for me. And then I respected George Lucas. I didn't know very much about Jim Henson, but I learned a lot about George Lucas thanks to those documentaries they would present on TV, and like Making of Star Wars, and From Star Wars to Jedi. There's a documentary From Star Wars to Jedi, and The Creature, a documentary talking about the creatures of Return of the Jedi. There were 2 documentaries made coinciding with the release of Return of the Jedi. So I respected and I was enthusiastic about what George Lucas was creating and how he went about it. So I guess my early role model, if you could call it that, I don't like to think of myself as following what other people are doing, but George Lucas was somebody that I very much respected as an artist and I was enthusiastic about what he was doing as an artist. Okay, I'm just going to let it out. Okay, passions. All right, drawing early on in my childhood, and then that evolved into writing very quickly. I was writing stories and Transformers early on, the toy line, very much. Oh, before that, of course, I'm just going to reel off a whole bunch of passions. I never really leave these things as passions. They just remain dormant, I think, or put kind of in the background when other passions come in as I grow older. But they're all passions, so I don't want to leave anything out. All right, early on in childhood, I liked Star Wars very much, and I was passionate about that. And that was Return of the Jedi was the earliest film that I remember seeing in the movie theater, and I'd seen that several times. Then in early elementary school, there are 2 periods of elementary school cut in half because I moved. Early elementary school, I was drawing. I was probably drawing all through my life, like in that period, even before this. But yes, I was. I remember because I lived some time in Canada when I was about 6 years old. So I was drawing then, and drawing was a big passion of mine. Like, it was all about drawing and Star Wars. And then my mom tried to encourage me in music. Well, nudged me a little bit periodically in terms of music. Not even that much at the time, but I remember her getting a microphone for me. But then writing stories became a big passion, and that coincided in still in that early half of elementary school. I'd say 3rd grade. I became friends with somebody who collected Transformers, and the boys at school collected Transformers, and I was fascinated with Transformers. I became fascinated with Transformers, and I would collect these spiral. I still have them, 2 spiral notebooks, where either I or my mom sitting in the toy store, or occasionally with a friend. I think it was primarily it was at the toy store. Would copy down the paragraphs that you would see in the tech specs of the Transformers toys. The Transformer would have a box, and on the back there would be a tech specs thing. It would have it was a curve going up and down. It would be endurance, rank, courage, firepower, speed, skill, the rest, rank, whatever, skill, whatever. If given the time, I could remember them all in order. Strength, speed, courage, firepower, skill, intelligence, whatever. And then over here would be a paragraph, and it would give the name, which allegiance, Autobot or Decepticon. You can tell I'm passionate, still passionate. Autobot or Decepticon. The function, like communicator or espionage or commander or something. And then a motto. And then a paragraph starting off with a personality. I'm glad they start off usually with, I think all the paragraphs start off with a personality, and then describe the skills and the weaponry and the physical skills that the character had, and sometimes mentioned a weakness. And I would copy these, I would save them in a spiral notebook, and I had another spiral notebook simply because there were 2, and I happened to have the other one I happened to have one handy at the time and not the other one. And so I was passionate about Transformers and drawing, and I was very good at drawing, very high artistic skill for my age. I mean, it was almost adult level, I would say, or at least like almost college level drawing skill at like 7 or 8 years old. And then all this feeds into my creative career aspirations and so forth. So you can see the path I'm going along. Drawing and Transformers, and I watched the TV show Transformers, the cartoon, eventually when it was aired Saturday mornings, and I didn't have cable early on. My mom quickly got cable for us because of my urging. And then about that time, I was writing Transformers stories. I was making up my own narrative stories using Transformers characters, and I became interested in Star Trek around the end of 1986, maybe January maybe of 1987, and I exposed myself as much as I could to whatever was Star Trek and caught up, so that by the time summer rolled around of 1987, I had read the DC comic books, some of the Marvel comic books. I was familiar with the characters. I think I had seen the bulk, if not all, of the original TV series, thanks to reruns on TV 5 days a week. And I mean, each episode on each day, 5 days a week. And and then some of the novels I was aware of and so forth. By that summer, I was thoroughly involved with and very knowledgeable in the behind-the-scenes aspects of Star Trek. By the time that summer, and then there were already advertisements for the upcoming new TV show, Star Trek: The Next Generation. I remember that. And I began writing stories about Star Trek a little bit, primarily like Transformers. And then in middle school, I remember my friend's birthday party I was invited to, and I did a number of things, one of which was writing a novella. I think it was like 60 pages typed out, of a Transformers novella that I had developed and written whole works, and I was proud of that, and I still have it. And Star Trek took stronger hold of me. Transformers tended to die off, but as I said before, nothing ever leaves you in terms of a passion, at least for me. It just goes into the background. It's overshadowed by another thing. In this case, Star Trek overshadowed Transformers. And then drawing went away. I didn't draw as much. And what else? Passions. And then screenwriting came in. I should say, I'll call it screenwriting, script writing. I became more interested in television as a career. It's weird to delineate at what point did I become interested in writing for television. At what point do you start? At what point do you start? You quit moving your hands like this. At what point do you start? Like, I was watching television at an early age. Adult sitcoms. I occasionally watch like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street just for the entertainment value. But aside from that, I just watched, with an adult sense of mind. I watched adult sitcoms when I was in elementary school. I remember Punky Brewster and I don't know, whatever else was on TV, 1984, 1985, 1986, whatever was something that I would enjoy in prime time, I enjoyed and watched back then. I would have been 7, 8, really 8, 9, 10 years old, and I enjoyed watching and I enjoyed the shows themselves. And then later on, like middle school, I wrote a short, almost transcript size short script for a Star Trek Next Generation episode. And then in high school, I became more involved, more enthusiastic on my own about writing for television and the television industry and getting a career, like actually having a living, doing something fun. And I remember wishing that the school day would be over, and I didn't want to be in school. I wanted to move to Los Angeles, and I wanted to develop that television writing career. And coinciding with that was Star Trek, and I wanted to do what Gene Roddenberry had done, which was create a television series of my own, or several television series of my own. And so I could go on and on, but that was it. If I can remember even what the question was. What are your passions? Oh, what are your passions? So that's what started early on, and those still are my passions now. UFOs and the supernatural. I don't think it was earlier elementary school. I think it was from fourth grade onward, or at least more prominently fourth grade onward. I was interested in reading adult books about, as I said before, adult books about primarily UFOs, but mysteries in general, like the Mary Celeste, the mystery of the Marie Celeste. I would say Mary Celeste, and UFOs primarily, ghosts and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and the Bermuda Triangle and so forth. Adult books, and typically I would even go to the school library during lunch periods, or I don't know about lunch periods, but like I would go to the school library and borrow books. Oh yeah, because we had resource, and it would shift depending on the day. We had gym one day, and we had library another day, and then it was music, gym. Actually, I remembered an acronym, and I told it to my homeroom teacher because she was typically confused as to which day went with what resource class. So I remember gym likes many animals, so it would have, at least for that year, it would have been gym, library, music, art. That's 4, and then I don't know, I guess it would cycle over, so it would fluctuate. But gym, it would be in that order, and I guess Friday we would do gym again, so it wasn't consistently. There are 5 days a week, and there are 4 resource classes, so it would fall out of order it would fall out of synchronization with the week very quickly. But anyway, you get the idea. My passions, and that was in high school. I was writing I say screenplays because that's closer to, I was writing speculative episodes of TV shows I enjoyed, spec scripts. And then towards senior year of high school, I thought about writing film scripts. I'm kind of dubbing this down, not using industry terms, just scripts. It would be full-length feature films. And then senior year, and then in college, I began really writing feature-length screenplay scripts. Those are my passions, I guess, that are my strongest, and I'll stick to that. The more apt question is, when was your relationship? I mentioned this before. I've touched on this in an earlier question, but fortunately, I haven't had many romantic, I guess that's what the question is asking. I haven't had many romantic relationships, and they haven't gone that far, sadly, except the relationships in my head. I could mention that too. When was your last? Well, I'll summarize the ones I've had, and going back actually to, I don't even know if you'd call this a relationship. Well, it says something about me. In middle school, I remember a couple of notes, a few times, some people, I don't know whether they were playing around or what, but some girls would pass me, a girl would occasionally pass me a note, would you like to go out with me or something, and I didn't do anything with that because I saw it as them making fun of me or playing games, not making fun of me, playing games with me, and I didn't think it was really serious. And I wonder, since the reunion is coming up, the high school reunion, I'd like to ask them if any of them were genuine, and I'm sorry if they were genuine or whatever, and it depends on each person, I guess. There's one person in particular I had I don't want to say a crush on, she was flirtatious, and she didn't pass me a note, but she made some gestures that were kind of like passing me a note. And I think it was in good fun. I think she was just being a girl and just being fun-loving and active. And I don't think she will, but in the reunion, I hope that she's there so that I can ask her, because I've wanted to. All right, moving past that, senior year began something I hope would go into something further, or at least a nice friendship, and I don't want to delve into that. Um, but I liked being able to share my creative stuff with her and poetry and so forth, and opening up. After all, these questions are really about eliciting some kind of story about your life, and so in that case, I'm glad that I was able to share with her and make an impact on her. I was able to show what I wanted to do all along in reaching out to her. I wanted to show her what I was really like, and what I enjoyed, and just open up to her. And I'm glad that I did that, and I think she took it that way, and so forth. Then I mentioned that in earlier questions, I mentioned efforts at dating, and they were basically either silence, or if I did meet up with somebody, again, I'm assuming these are romantic relationships in the question. It was conversational for a bit, and we would perhaps become friends for a while, and then drift apart. And sadly, that I don't have much to say. We were on happy terms, and so forth. Okay, back to easier questions. I first notice, I'll be very stereotypical. I'm sorry. I'm being just honest. I'm being open and honest. In terms of attractiveness, physically, I'm a very visual person. So I notice how slender the woman is, like how physically, I don't want to say physically, how slender the woman is, how fancy the outfit is on the woman, all together, the look of the woman. I'm attracted towards femininity, so I'm attracted to either short, like pixie looking women, or somewhat like tall, normal height. I like shoulder length hair. Again, I'm just being open. Shoulder length hair, I tend towards blondes. I'm thinking of Madonna again, like what attracts me to her. And then almost immediately the woman will exhibit how she is, and I'm attracted. I notice open people, like I said before, this flirtatious, rambunctious, lively girl I knew in middle school, and we were in the same high school together. And I never made any overtures towards her, but I was sort of attracted to her, and blondness, and she was blonde, and I remember I have an attraction towards mermaids, and I remember a girl in high school having it reminded me of Madison's blonde hair in the movie Splash, and I was attracted towards that. And if the person is open and genuinely like warm, compassionate, curious about me, I notice those things. I become I am naturally attracted to those things. And I guess that's it. Oh, gee willikers, let me guess. It's Madonna. But let me actually, in clicking on that record button, I was thinking I could also mention the earlier celebrity crushes I've had. I do have other crushes. I have had other celebrity crushes too, but for the reasons I mentioned before, Madonna. And it sounds like ad nauseum. And actually, if I were dating in one of those fantasies, I thought I want to date someone Jewish. She's not Jewish. She was interested in Kabbalah. She studied Kabbalah, but I don't think she's as attached to Kabbalah as somebody else. Strictly speaking, in terms of Judaism, if I were to replace Madonna with someone else, Paula Abdul has come to mind. think she has the same spirit. I think we'll be compatible together. I think so. I'm not saying we would be, but I'm just saying from what I know, I have this inkling. I think we would be compatible, similar in some similar interests at least, music and acting and being vivacious and outgoing and nice personality, and we're both Jewish and so forth, and somewhat observant. I think she mentioned her rabbi something something, so it seems she's at least somewhat observant. I remember the earliest crush I remember having, celebrity crush, was Soleil Moon Frye, and this would have been 1984, and so I would have been like 8 years old or 9 years old. I once sent her some kind of a letter or something. I got back from her management team somewhere. So I just got back I think it was a black and white postcard with her posing. This is a child. Punky Brewster is a child. Posing, and I think it was signed Soleil Moon Frye. That was it. Maybe there was something written on the back or something. And what's other celebrity crushes? Certainly on TV, I've had celebrity crushes. Those would be classified as celebrity crushes. I remember being attracted to characters. I remember Samantha Stevens being attractive, seeming attractive, but that's not necessarily Elizabeth Montgomery. That's Samantha Stevens, and so that was 1984, 86, 87. Counselor Troy in Star Trek The Next Generation was just about the only feminized character in that show. I was attracted physically to her on screen, but that was about it. And this wasn't Marina Sirtis. I don't really, no other celebrity crushes really come to mind except Madonna, really. That's it. Okay. I don't like to say I would like to be some other person. I would rather say I would like to step into the shoes of being some other person. And this goes back to perhaps 1-to-1 ratio, back to my answer to the question of role models. I would like to, well, nobody in particular, but I would like to be President of the United States. That was one of my bachelor degrees in college. I would also like to step into the shoes of Steven Spielberg. I'd like to, I guess, most prominently, the two that come to mind are Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. I'd like to have, I don't even want to say have the career that they've had. I'd like to have the opportunity to be working in the field and accomplish as much as they have and made it as much of an impact on our culture as they have, but with my own artistic taste and sensibilities and creative expression. Okay, I'll be honest. As long as it doesn't have to be somebody famous, for one day, I'd like to be a woman for a day and see what it's like, experience what it's like, and that ties in with one of my motivations for becoming a female impersonator and developing my skill and talent. I'd like to understand what it feels like, what women go through, and a sensual, I literally mean sensual as in the senses. I like to experience what it's like, and I like the comfort and I guess women have more sensitive skin, and speaking and being able to, like, walking around and having the experience of people watching you or seeing, whatever you get. I was going to say good or bad, but I mean people catching your eye, you catching their eye, and not necessarily romantic or whatever, just I like to experience what it's like for a day. Okay, ice cream comes to mind. I'm very much a chocoholic. Oh, not a chocoholic, but I love chocolate. Pecan pie. I used to say pecan pie, but pecan, it depends on tomato or tomato. Anyway, uh, I loved eating ice cream when I was a child, and I liked sugary. I'm catching how much sugar there is, and I'm eating hopefully less sugary cereals. But I love cereal, and I love and comfort food. Like not necessarily what's your favorite, but what gives you comfort when you're eating. I like the succulent, very tasty skin, not necessarily the meat on a chicken, but when you have like a rotisserie chicken and you have very seasoned, very succulent, very strong tastes in the skin. I like to rip the skin off. I like to chew on the skin if it's a very strong taste. I have very strong taste buds. I have very much a sweet tooth, and I like ice cream. I mean, if my weight weren't a concern or whatever, just comfort food. I like ice cream, especially if it's chocolate. I just like chocolate and dark chocolate, not white. I remember some radio psychologist. There's Dr. Laura Schlesinger and Dr. Laura Brown. Remember Dr. Laura Brown saying, being suspicious in a comical way. She said something that she was suspicious of people who preferred white chocolate to dark chocolate. It's just funny. Dark chocolate and the skin off of rotisserie chicken and ice cream and cereal, especially sugary cereals and sweetened things, and let me see, drinks, sodas I enjoy, especially the ones that aren't don't taste artificial. They just taste sweet. Like I remember Orange Crush. I had a crush on Orange Crush as a child and Grape Crush. And then later on they came up with Apple Crush. It took them decades apparently to come up with Apple Crush. But I'm a Pepsi person as opposed to a Coca-Cola person. I don't drink those now. What I do eat now, I guess for comfort food, isn't that much because I'm sticking to drinking more water and eating canned vegetables and sometimes carrots and bread. I've gotten back to, or I should say, I've returned to eating whole grain bread, not white bread, but whole grain bread because it's healthier and it builds up fiber and so forth. And I'm trying to reduce this waistline. And how cruel could this question be? Comfort food, and you're within the same video as you're also talking about weight. I've talked about weight and so forth. But anyway, I've talked enough. I liked peanut butter sandwiches as a child. What I liked as a child, I liked ice cream. I liked cereal, sugary cereals. I loved S'mores Crunch cereal, and I loved peanut butter sandwiches. Sometimes peanut butter and jelly if I had that. Usually I have peanut butter sandwiches, dark chocolate, chocolate peanut, and chocolate peanut butter too. I like that. I guess that's it. On to the next question. Okay, my first favorite thing about dating, I mean, when I say hypothetically, if I go on a date, the first thing I enjoy is the notion that there's someone who looks forward to meeting me. That means very much to me. And wondering what she looks like, immediately I usually can't really see what the person... Well, actually, I guess on dating apps, they do give you a profile, like what the person looks like. So I'm thinking about what she looks like, and I'm very glad and, very, very glad that there's somebody thinking about me and anticipating meeting me. And then when we meet and we talk, I'm looking forward to talking with her and learning about her to see if we are a good match. Not just to see if we're a good match, but learning more about her. And I wish that would come out more in moments when I've been matched with somebody and we were both given phone numbers and I talk with her and then she asks, so what do you do for a living? Where do you live? And it feels like I'm being cross-examined and it's a very uncomfortable feeling, and I haven't really had, I guess I shouldn't say I haven't had any experiences where it's been an actual date, but I feel as though they've been rare, at the very least, and I haven't really had time, like on a date, to experience talking with somebody and getting to know that, like a man and a woman, talking with them. I've had experiences like that with women who are already spoken for, or married, or whatever. So I guess there's that. You mean pet peeves in general? Or you mean pet peeves about dating, or do you mean pet peeves in general? I can talk about. All right. Well, let's get pet peeves about dating right off the bat. Taking care of right off the bat. I don't like when a woman is quiet and just doesn't say much, and it's like pulling teeth. Same thing with profiles. Not just meeting a woman, but like, or being on a date, but being on dating profiles when a woman has this picture, lively picture, like she's out in the sun or she has sunglasses or something. And then you read the profile, and I'm being, what's the right word? I'm putting myself in her shoes because I don't like getting messages that hardly say much. So I'm trying to write some kind of thing that elicits a response from her. And she has this picture, and then first of all, if she writes anything, she says, like, I like music. I like music and park walks, and I want to find that special someone. I can't. I'm really pulling teeth to try and write some response to that, to get her to get a response out of the the profiled person. And all right, what am I? So just not revealing much about herself or anything about herself. That's a pet peeve. In general, pet peeves: people who don't pay attention to what they're doing, and it also seems like they're not. I'm presuming they don't care about what they're doing. They don't care about the grander scheme. People who aren't curious about the universe, who aren't curious enough about learning about things or being curious about things. Grammar is a big pet peeve. I was going to say a big thing, a big pet peeve of mine. People who don't respect other people, like I've worked in a supermarket in the meat department for a long time. That was before, fortunately, recently switching jobs. And they would just haphazardly just leave stuff. I mentioned several times that to coworkers that when I was 7 or 8, you remember, those of you who are older, about my age or something, you remember those toy stores? You remember the rod, back when they had toy stores, those rods that would stick out, and then you would have, like, for example, Kenner Star Wars action figures that would be on a card, and those very good memories of when they actually paid attention to toys and accuracy and so forth, and name brands and so forth. The card would be stuck on a rod, and there would be several different rods on the wall. And even at 7 or 8 years old, even with Transformers or something, I paid enough attention. I respected the store enough to not only put it back where I found it somewhere in that section, but stick it back on the same rod. If I took it out from behind a few other ones, where there were other ones on the rod but in front of it, I would take those off and then put it back in the same order that I found it in. And that's part of being respectful and paying attention to things. It all gels together. Being respectful and being curious and putting things back where they putting things back where you found them. Um, and grammar, using good grammar. I don't consider myself like a member of the grammar police, but I respect myself in the sense that I use language as a form of communication, not just literal communication, but a means of expression, mental expiration, mental expression. And so people who use poor grammar, who don't even care to learn, or they may even, this is worse. I respect people slightly more if they don't know proper grammar than people who know better. You know, you ought to know better. People who know better grammar, but they simply don't use it. I have less respect for them because they don't stick up for themselves as people. I suppose they're trying to join in the crowd, or they don't want to stand out, or they feel perhaps that if they use better grammar that they'll be kicked out or won't be seen as part of the rest of the group that uses bad grammar. It's like the crab effect, where one crab tries to crawl out and then the other crabs pull the crab back into the pit and being trapped. I guess those are the biggest pet peeves for me. Oh, you're asking somebody who went to college and couldn't decide between these two fields of interest. So I'm someone who got a bachelor's degree in television, radio, film, production, writing, so forth, and somebody interested in politics. And you're talking to somebody who, in excuse me, somewhere between like junior and senior year, I can date it to 1992, the presidential campaign, eventually the debates and onward. Wanted to go into politics and become president of the United States. Run for president, run for governor. I saw gubernatorialship as a means to the presidency. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I knew all that. What was the question again? What are your thoughts on politics? All right, well, it's a little mini. I thought about doing a separate video, but this is a preview. If I do a separate video on politics, my political thoughts, this is a preview of that. I'm going to say it straight out. I'm honest. I'm a Democrat. All right. So in terms of dating, somebody who's a Republican would be probably a problem in, at least when we're talking politics, and probably other things in life would probably irk me. I don't want to say it's I don't want to really turn somebody away, and I don't want to seem prejudiced, but just somebody who's not interested in politics, I'm fine with. Somebody who's especially Democratic leaning, I'm more prone to liking. Somebody who's strong Republican or conservative, I would feel like a step back, a disconnect. It's the best word for a disconnect with that person, not consciously, but it's just there. My thoughts on politics. All right, what do I mean by Democrat? I think that we should have a mixed economy. I think that if capitalism, if let alone, solves a lot of problems. I think there is truth to that phrase in Wall Street. Greed is good. I think that greed works. People, I believe humans, I think, are motivated to do what's in their best interest, just inherently. And you can't control that. And I think for the most part, I think the private system, capitalism gets a bad rap, or seems to get a bad rap. I think our notion of like a free economy, I think for the most part works well, and it's a quick indicator of what works and what doesn't work. I think more so than that, I think that people inherently are drawn towards certain things, and they can't really be forced to like other things, and they vote with their wallets. That's a good phrase. They vote with their wallets. However, I think like anything else, I think capitalism can go overboard. It can become a mob. I think there's some interests that should be protected. Like we don't want to let the majority squash the minority. I think that the government that governs the least governs best. I think the government that there's a phrase, maybe it was by Jefferson or something. Maybe that was anyway. Somebody famous phrased, though the society, we are judged as a society by how well we treat its weakest people in society. I mean, weak in terms of status and so forth. I think there should be safeguards to protect people from starving to death. My mom, I should mention this, my mom was born in 1933, April 1933, so she lived through her early years were during the Depression, and I'm a studious student of history, and I know when things can go overboard. I know when robber barons can take control and sick dogs on people and take too much control. There's a phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we have made a lot of, government has made, I'll tell you, there are good things that government has done. Government has made a number of, government in general, like a monolith, American government has made a lot of strides in cleaning up our water, cleaning up our air. I'm not one of those people, I don't want to say I'm a conservationist necessarily, but I'm somebody, Theodore Roosevelt was a conservationist. I'm not somebody who berates and bemoans how we've treated, I'm not a tree hugger, berates and bemoans the earth and the environment. It's important to protect the environment. We can't live without trees, of course. We can't live without fresh air. We have to be careful of that. We have to monitor that because I think businesses left to their own devices will pollute the water and not care anything beyond making a profit and easing, lowering costs to themselves. And government should step in to say, hey, I know your only interest is in making a profit and cutting costs, but there's a societal concern here. And somebody put it, Michael Moore said one point, if profit was the only thing in society, we would have crack dealers on a national scale. If that was it, we would be selling crack. There's a societal concern we have about people's health, about the health of the environment, and the two go together. I came up when I was devising my platform for running for president and even running for governor. I listed some primary things I wanted to accomplish. I saw the era of Star Trek depicted, future depicted in Star Trek as being an ideal to move towards and to urge and coax as much as I could as president. And all right, getting back to politics, I see education as supremely important. I see education, I would have not just funneled money into it, but actively worked to innovate ideas like John Kennedy did earlier on. Active ideas, not just to throw money at it, but to develop it. Education is primary. I see overall these factors are the things I consider as investing in our future. Education, so that we have a more educated workforce, not just workforce, but more educated people, more educated society, so that they can vote more smartly, better, vote with a better education, a better sense of history and so forth. And investing in technology that would go towards military for one, not just to wage war. I would limit war, the number of overseas conflicts. I would be aware and even pull out if it seems that our nation is straining its resources in terms of warfare, because I know in the past that's really screwed us over. And wouldn't I would be very careful about where we get involved in terms of combat. I would have an end goal in mind. I wouldn't just like Vietnam. I think tortured us as a nation socially, emotionally, if you could say that as emotionally tortured us as a nation. I would go in with an end result in mind, like what are our goals? What do we hope to accomplish? What if we aren't doing those? When do we pull out? I would support our allies. I would invest in technology in general for medicine, for the military, so that we don't have to be beholden to other countries, for example, for oil and natural resources. I would think of alternatives, and I would boost up our own economy. Maybe that would hurt our economy internationally. I don't know. I could see that happening. But if that weren't a factor, I would want to boost our economy. I would want to cut the deficit, cut into the debt as much as possible. And I want us to have a debt-free nation, no anchors, I don't want to say no obligations to prior generations. You know what I mean, like no problems that we're sending on to future generations or perpetuating bad things to future generations. It's like a family, it's like a childhood, growing up to adulthood and then having a child, him or herself. You don't want to pass on your own problems to your children. So primarily it's education and technology and funneling that into peaceful space exploration and science and the military. Inevitably the military will get to it, but military in good constructive means so that we don't have to risk our own people. And I'm very conscious of the movie First Blood. It's commonly called Rambo, but the actual title is First Blood. It's based on a novel by David Morrell, and it's about somebody who suffered PTSD, and it's only 7 years. He says, the Rambo says he has had nightmares for 7 years. I don't want anybody to go through that. I want to be very careful about anybody we send overseas. Because certainly aware that there are people who are gung-ho, who are eager to serve their country, so forth. What else? An educated populace. I think those, okay, I could prolong this, but I'll save that for future politics video. Okay, well, I talked a lot about where I wish I were now based on situations and like living in Los Angeles and having a home and being married and so forth. But one thing I could control that I wish were different about myself is losing that 30 or 40 pounds. That would go a long way towards my health. I think I'm quite healthy. I know I'm quite healthy. When I've been in the hospital, I've had a normal heart rate, no weird problems except for a stroke that one time was due to a blood clot. People call it a stroke. What happened was it was a blood clot that for a moment clotted enough to cut off signals to this part of the blood to the left arm and left leg. I just like to lose those pounds and be more physically fit. For those of you interested in Star Trek, for those Star Trek fans out there, they may understand this. I've thought about Spock and Vulcans in general. It's not that in Star Trek lore, in the Star Trek universe, it's not that Vulcans don't have emotions. It's that they've learned to channel their emotions. There's a question about that. Like in terms of Darwinism, over a period of several generations, if you find having rationality and logic over emotions more desirable in a mate, then would the emotional capabilities weaken over the generations? I mean, that's basically basic Darwinism. But it's been, so I think that's the more realistic thing. Anyway, all right, that's getting off on a tangent. It's Vulcans in Star Trek have learned to channel their emotions. Myself, I think that I guess for most, it's hard to differentiate because, all right, I'll use a lot of hand gestures in here. As you might see, I'm not very expressive, I guess, with my face, at least talking in front of a camera with nobody in front of me. I channel the two together. I'm very passionate. That's why I like the word passionate over emotional. I'm passionate about certain things. I'm very driven towards certain things, and it's focused toward a concerted effort towards achieving goals, achieving things, repairing things, whatever endeavor I'm in. If I'm wholeheartedly behind it, like I'm impassioned, I feel things internally. I don't necessarily express them visually, like facially. I smile and I laugh, and that's what earlier in this video I talked about watching Star Trek. And if you were to see me watching like Star Trek: The Next Generation, watching a new episode or film or something of Star Trek, I would look like somebody watching sports, a sports game. I can be very enthusiastic and just enthusiastic, but very poised and watching, enthusiastic and poised. And I see Steven Spielberg, from what I've seen in interviews and so forth. I don't know what he's like behind when the camera isn't on, so forth. I see Steven Spielberg as I see him as being like that, where he's not just laughing like superficially, but I suspect, at least in my case, I suspect that the more genuine and the more wholehearted, the deeper the passion, the less you show superficially. That's basically it. Perhaps the same with George Lucas as well. Okay, in this outro, I'm going to keep it short. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm proud of it. I think it's a great idea. Stay tuned, by the way, for part 2. I completely forgot about part 2. There are some questions. I'm going to load some more questions in about what I am looking for in someone. Again, this is what I would call a mock dating video, as if you were watching this, in a dating company, and they pull out a video cassette and they watch somebody interviewed, being asked questions about himself and what he's looking for in a woman. So this is part 1. In part 2, I'm going to be doing the same setup, the same format, but I'm going to be answering interesting questions about what type of woman I'm looking for. I was going to say what ideal, but I shouldn't say that. What type of, in some sense, yeah, ideal woman I'm looking for. We all shoot high. I think many of us, I like to think many of us shoot high. So if you like this, I'm glad that this also let me share my own personal thoughts and experiences and open up more instead of explaining concepts about the universe, which I also enjoy, and sharing my creativity. I opened up a lot, and I hope people who do know me personally, I hope, like for example classmates and so forth, I hope they're watching. And with that high school reunion coming up, it's going to be the 30th high school reunion. I'm looking forward to experiencing whether they have seen my YouTube channel and they've learned a lot about me from it. And in any event, it gave me a great opportunity to talk about myself a lot more and delve into myself a lot more. So look forward to part 2. And if you enjoy this channel in general, the content here, please consider subscribing. It's that simple as that subscribe button. And certainly like this video. And I'll see you next time. Bye.